Hey y'all, welcome to the cosmic time of the week. I'm Bill, the accidental physicist,
And I'm Amy, the incidental psychologist.
and it's Tuesday after lunch.
So let's talk about one of the articles you wrote recently. It's called The Weird Physics of Asteroids and Crowd Wisdom. How did those two ideas come together?
Well, of course, Artemis just went up, and we've got folks out there that are actually getting ready to go to the moon, the deepest space people have ever been in. But we've had probes that go to deeper space. Something called OSIRIS went to an asteroid Bennu. And NASA knew all this before they got there, but Bennu is just a loose collection of rocks and rubble that happens to be traveling through space together. So the physics is way different. It doesn't have gravity, and when you touch it, you get sucked in by all the forces that are holding all that stuff together, not the least of which is just the fact that all those rocks are sticking together, traveling in the same direction, just inertia. Um, and the lander kind of got sucked down, but NASA had prepared special jets to get it out of that, and they got what they wanted, and but they had to do a lot of study up front. I mean, it's literally circled the asteroid for like 2 years, taking pictures and sending back data so that they could figure out where was the safest place to touch it that wouldn't actually like just suck the probe into the junk. And that gave me the idea for, oh, wait a minute, crowd wisdom is the same way. You get sucked in, you get pulled in by all these ideas, and they're sort of like a moving target. And next week, the old meme is so last year, and you're now on something else, but you just jump from thing to thing, and you're surfing basically junk.
And you're telling me this as a metaphor for my Twitter feed?
I'm telling you, this is a metaphor for just about everything right now, honestly.
Okay, so before we move on, let's talk through the actual physics. You talk about Bennu, but when people think about Bennu, it's not just any asteroids.
Correct. Some asteroids are solid rock. They're big pieces of stone that we're worried will crash into Dallas and, leave Texas off the map. Um, but most of them are not solid rocks. Bennu is closer to like a bag of gravel that forgot that there's a bag or there's no bag. It's like billions of fragments that are loosely bound. There's no gravity. The gravity is barely measurable, but tied together by what physicists call weak forces. Van der Waals forces, electrostatic charge. There's a kind of adhesion you get when things are just close enough. For example, you can weld two pieces of metal in space, and they don't just weld, they become one piece of metal because the atoms don't know the difference in the vacuum. Um, you just have to get close enough for long enough.
So it's not about being one piece. It's about you don't even have to understand each other. You just have to be small enough to hold on to each other.
That's exactly right. You just need to agree on a direction and follow that direction no matter what as a group. And that's enough. That's what holds an asteroid together.
That sounds like a concept in psychology called mere exposure effect. So it's about you having to be you having to be exposed to that concept long enough to like it. You don't even have to start liking it, but you might prefer it just because you get exposed to it long enough. And actually, Robert proved this in the 60s. Um, he showed people these random different shapes, but you just have to show it enough times. And then they'll just like it. They'll tell him that they like it. And it's not because it's meaningful, it's because it's familiar. The same way you turn up the TV. And if you get to see that commercial enough times, once you go to the store, maybe you pick that product and buy it. You didn't even have to like it. You're familiar to it because you're exposed to it enough times.
Right. The asteroid isn't held together by anything meaningful either, just proximity. It's just how things do when they bump into each other in space and start moving in the same direction.
And that's the part that I think scares me the most because the question isn't the idea of being good. It's the idea of like being exposed to this enough time that it feels good. And those are very different questions because most people can't tell the difference.
Yeah, that's where it gets uncomfortable. Because what I'm describing with Bennu, that's exactly how our information environment works. Social media doesn't bind us with strong forces, really no strong forces at all. It binds us the way Bennu's Rubble binds, through proximity and repetition. It's like a low-grade noise in the attention economy.
And this is where mere exposure effect stops being fun in a psychological fact, and it starts being more like an operating system. It seems like every algorithmic feed is essentially a mere exposure machine. It doesn't need to show you everything that's true. It just needs to show you something often enough that your brain starts registering it and maybe you believe in it.
Exactly. There's no single rock or piece of dust in that rubble pile that cares what the whole thing is doing. It's just going along for the ride.
And no single user of the feed knows what the algorithm is optimizing for. So the pile just coheres and then shifts and then maybe coheres again. Same mechanism, but different scale.
Yeah, I actually chased this back to the 20s in my piece. Madison Avenue figured out how to manufacture desire, not for things people needed, but just for shapes people wanted to take. Buy this car and become that man.
Now, the weak signals, when it becomes a strong belief, not because it earned that status, but because the repetition, I think it's a shortcut past critical thinking. We stop
Exactly,
thinking at that point.
exactly. And people will do anything to avoid critical thinking. People will do manual labor if they don't have to think. And Wall Street learned that trick. Back in the 20s, they manufactured value and leveraged it and leveraged the leverage. They created margins. And then people took out margins on the margins and margins on top of that. And it held together beautifully.
Until it doesn't. And because of that, there's nothing load bearing at the center. You just sort of unravel the ball of yarn and there's nothing in the middle anymore.
I think you just described the social depression we're living in right now.
Oh, screen time. Okay, so here's my question. If weak forces are winning on volume, and I think they are, does that mean the strong forces are gone?
Well, yeah, that's the key distinction. The neighbor who shows up with food after somebody dies, that's still happening. The stranger who helps you reach the cereal on the top shelf, they're still there. The person in the comment section who says that that's not right and means it without trying to promote themselves or perform at all, they're still around. But they're being drowned out by the static of all the social rubble in the pile.
Here's the cruel irony from the psychology standpoint. The mere exposure effect works on volume. Decency is quiet. Outrage is loud. So when the algorithm amplifies what's loud, which means we get merely exposed to outrage, which means outrage starts to feel normal. And when it feels normal, decency became unusual. It's not wrong, it's just familiar. When people are familiar with something so much, unfamiliar things becomes uncomfortable.
Exactly. The strong forces haven't weakened. They've just been outcompeted by weak forces that have better distribution channels.
And I think that's the most depressing sentence I've heard today. And I mean, I study human behavior for fun.
Here's what the Bennu probe actually teaches us, though. There's a way out. OSIRIS-REx didn't avoid touching the asteroid. You can't study something without making contact. And you can't live in modern society without touching its memes, the currents, the shapes of the moment. There are a few people around that don't have TVs and they swear they don't get caught up. And then you find out they went to see a Marvel movie. So withdrawal isn't the answer.
So, what do you think is the answer if withdrawal is not the answer?
Well, you just need your own retro rockets. You need your own compass, your own gyroscope. You have to have things you actually stand for, not just against.
Mm.
It has to be kind of moral physics that you've chosen consciously. It can be Christianity, it can be Buddhism, it can be atheism, it can be logic, it can be, oh, I believe in everything they said in Star Trek. It doesn't matter. And they prove this with Alcoholics Anonymous. In Alcoholics Anonymous, you have to have some higher power that you believe in. But it can be the pen in your pocket. It doesn't have to be God. It's just something you have to attach to, and you let that something force you to always come back to your own center, to these principles that are sturdy enough to give you your own orbit.
And that's what counters mere exposure effect. You just have to have a strong principle, something that you believe in so deeply that familiarity can't override them.
That's a better way to put it than I did, yeah. Well, so while we're at it, I'll tell you my first principle because it's the one that makes the rest of them honest.
Okay.
Distrust all claims for the one true way, even this one.
Even this one. I actually love that principle because it undermines itself on purpose. And it's not just a principle, it's actually a recursive function.
Correct. It's open source morality. You can fork it, modify it, run it on your own hardware, but you have to read the source code first. You don't take my principles to be the be all and end all. You don't take my principles to be yours. You take the kind of ideas they deal with, keeping it simple, finding something that matters to you, being yourself, telling the truth, and you make that work for you the way it needs to work for you. No blind installs.
And there's a very common quote in engineering where it says, if it's not broken, don't fix it. But if it breaks, you should fix it.
That's a big part of this whole message. We'll get to that later. Of course, pizza is always the answer, by the way, just so you know.
Pizza?
Yeah. So next time we should probably talk about why pizza is a good metaphor for life, the universe, and everything else, especially the fact that everything is exact without being exactly precise. Don't go down that rabbit hole now. But basically,
oh no,
imprecision defines the universe, and our attempt to try to make everything precise and exact is what fouls up the universe. So there's an inversion there. Again, let's don't go down the rabbit hole. There's lots of rabbits in there.
I'm actually more interested in how this all connects back to pizza now because I really want to know what's going on here.
Well, have you ever tried to cut a perfect pizza? First of all, have you ever tried to make a perfect pizza? I mean, so are all the pepperonis equally spaced? Is the cheese equally distributed? Is the dough even all the way through? No, it's never that way. It's just what it is.
And it's never a perfect circle.
Never a perfect circle. And you can cut it with any tool you want, and the slices are not going to be perfectly identical if you take it down to the right level. The question is whether you need to go to that level. And that's where we're screwed up. We want exact perfection when we go to space, but that's not what we strive for. We strive for something that works, and we'll leave the perfection to the next guy.
We've been touching on the surface of Rubble pile every day. We scroll, we read headlines, we got nudged by the algorithm, and the mere exposure effect is running in the background like a daemon process, quietly rewriting what feels normal to us.
Yeah, they used to call that brainwashing in the 50s. The question isn't whether you make contact with the pile. You're going to. The question is whether you have retro rockets. If you go in the grocery store to buy food, if you go onto Amazon to order it, or you try to get hold of Deal Dash or DoorDash or whatever it's called to bring it to you, you're still going to experience all those forces. The question is not whether you're going to, it's whether you have the ability to resist them, whether you have your own morality, your own mental principles, your own way of doing things, whether you have your own retro rockets.
And whether you've compiled them
exactly,
from the source.
Whether you've linked them to who you are, not who I am, not who Amy is, not who your favorite president or your favorite preacher or your favorite singer is, but who you are, what you believe and what you do. And next time we'll get into the physics and logic that fit underneath that. It's shockingly deep. We'll probably argue about it.
I don't have anything to argue, but I'm already into what we're going to talk about next time because it's pizza.
That's the spirit. Maybe we'll need to make and bring some pizza with us.